Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for Parent University as we discuss how we can support our children as they navigate complex feelings such as anxiety. This evening, Dr. Laura Kohler from Linden Oaks Behavioral Health will share understanding school anxiety and strategies to support your child. Dr. Kohler will share the why behind school-based anxiety as well as present parents with practical ways to help their child at home. At the end of the presentation, a panel of Indian Prairie School District 204 mental health staff members will answer the questions submitted through the registration, as well as any questions you enter in the chat. Please welcome Dr. Kohler.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you all inviting me to come and talk a little bit. So I am the manager of the Anxiety and OCD services at Endeavor Health Linden Oaks. I have been there for 15 years. I was a clinical therapist first in the adolescent anxiety and OCD services. And before becoming a manager, I also have a child myself. So I am a parent and am, know how difficult sometimes it can be when your child is having anxiety and wondering how I can help them. And so hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions for you today. So we will go ahead and get started. So we are going to talk about the signs and symptoms of anxiety. We're going to talk about some practical strategies just to help manage anxiety and overall anxiety in a healthy way, as well as looking at some strategies that we can use when anxiety gets to be intense or very high on a scale. So recognizing the symptoms and signs of anxiety related to school. All right. So anxiety. So I think anxiety is a tough one because anxiety is a basic human emotion that everyone experiences, but we also talk about anxiety as a disorder as well. So really, the true definition of anxiety is the anticipation of a future threat. So the question comes in, what does that future threat mean? So in general, anxiety serves to motivate and protect us from any sort of harm or unpleasant consequence. So what that means is if we're feeling embarrassed, if we're feeling like we're going to have a panic attack, if we're feeling scared about something, anxiety will come up to help us. And so, like I said, everyone on the planet experiences anxiety. So it is important to normalize anxiety, that we all have it. And it's really not something we want to get rid of because it's really communicating with us. It's helping us to see if something is dangerous or not, or if we feel there's going to be that unpleasant consequence. And so how do we then know if everyone has it and we're all experiencing it? How do we know that when it becomes a problem? So we say when it becomes a problem with three primary areas. One is that when it interferes with our daily functioning, so meaning that the things we once did we're no longer doing. So we're looking for that change. So we're looking for if when it comes to activities of daily life. So if we were once showering and brushing our teeth and doing our hair and makeup or dressing a certain way, and then we've shifted that and now we're no longer doing that. Or if we're the hobbies and interests. So if we like to play sports and we used to like to play musical instruments or do art, or we spent a lot of time with family and friends and now we're spending more time in our room. So if just kind of the daily functioning that we once were doing, now we're not doing anymore because of the anxiety, that might be a red flag that the traditional kind of everyday anxiety has turned into a disorder. Also, if it lasts beyond a difficult circumstance. So it's very common to have anxiety if we're doing something like a speech, or if we're doing having a test, if we're trying out for a sport, or starting a club for the first day. But then if even after the test is over, after the speech, after we've gone to that event, if we continue to experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of talking about it, going around about it, even though it's been hours since the event, that might be a red flag as well. And then occurs with everyday situations where there's no fact threat exists. So that's going to be another one that perhaps it went from being anxious about tests and speeches that's very common to now it transforming into things that perhaps the person has done several times and it hasn't brought about anxiety. Sometimes once the anxiety kind of gets woken up and comes about, it starts to hang around a little bit longer and starts to put its 2 cents in on other situations or situations again we've done before. So those are some of the things that would kind of flip a traditional anxiety into an anxiety disorder. So some common symptoms you might look for, there's quite a few, which is why I think sometimes anxiety can seem tough and why kids in particular sometimes feel like people don't understand or you don't have anxiety the way that I have, because really anxiety symptoms can kind of spread out through the body. So you could line up 10 kids and they all experience something different. One kid could have stomach aches, another kids could have headaches, another kid could have severe sleep problems. Another person has no appetite, while another person has a high appetite. And really, that there's a reason for all of these. So as we're experiencing anxiety, if you imagine a scale of like 1 to 10, as we're starting to climb up that ladder, what could happen is that fight or flight system that we've, heard much about, that, when our body's getting ready because we think there's a potential threat out there. And so as we start to climb our anxiety ladder, anxiety is getting ready, if it thinks it needs to activate that system. And so when that system comes in, some of these anxiety comes into play to help us either fight off or to run away from whatever we think the threat is. So, for example, stomach aches is a really big one that we see at Endeavor Health Linden Oaks and the anxiety and OCD services. We see a lot of stomach aches. And the reason that we get stomach aches is, again, as the anxiety is starting to increase and that fight or flight system might be getting activated, our body is moving all the resources that we have to our arms and our legs, so that we can either run away as fast as we can with our legs, or that we can fight off whatever this harm is with our arms and our legs. Well, because those resources shift so quickly, that it can create a stomach ache, because things that are not necessary to survive an emotional experience, like in the fight or flight getting activated if we think there's a threat. A system that is not necessary for that will slow down. So, for example, digestion. Digestion's not needed if we need to fight or run away from something that we think is going to cause us harm. And so it'll pause in that time. Well, pausing that digestion can just cause this big influx and then cause us to have a stomach ache. So that's just like one example. Another one that we do here sometimes is fidgeting or feeling like tingling or numbness in the hands. And again, same idea of like, because all those resources are going to our hands and our feet, and there's extra energy going on in there because we're not actually using the energy to run away or fight, then our hands can sometimes just feel tingly or I feel really fidgety because I need to get some of that out. And where the problem often comes in is, if it is a test, if it is a speech, and that anxiety is kind of increasing over the traditional threshold to perhaps an anxiety disorder or that intense anxiety, there isn't anywhere to sort of fight or run if it's of a test, or if it's a speech, or if it's, again, kind of walking into a club for the very first time. So then there really isn't anywhere for that extra energy to go. And so the skills that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit are some things that can help when we have all of that extra energy that's in our body, when there's really nothing specific to run or fight off. So some signs you might be looking for, again, we talked a couple about these already, but intense physical sensations like stomach ache or headaches, especially if they're happening just in the morning. Sometimes they'll happen right before bedtime. So really kind of centered around school. A frequent trip to the guidance office or nurse's office, possibly even refusing to go to school, a loss of interest in hobbies, or they used to go to clubs and sports all the time, now they're asking, I don't want to do that anymore. Sometimes when we have anxiety about school or even something specific, it can start to spread. And so then even things that we used to enjoy at school, if that anxiety starts to get a little too big, our anxiety can tell us, that sport though happens at school, and so then it can kind of increase from there. And if we avoid too much, our tolerance level goes down, and then our tolerance level goes down for other things as well by accident, that we didn't even mean for that to occur. Struggles with concentration and focus. So if our anxiety is concerned that there's some sort of threat or harm going to be against us, and there's a lot of research out there that shows that if we feel that we're not belonging socially, or if we feel that we're going to perhaps get embarrassed and get like ostracized by the group, that especially for a kid or a teenager, that can be just as perceived as harmful as like a physical threat, as if we were walking, at night in the dark, and we hear someone behind us. That social belonging is just as critical to us with feeling safe, and so if that is being threatened for whatever reason, that the anxiety can that same system can be activated. Seeking reassurance. So are you sure it's going to be okay? Are you sure? Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? In our program, we will, if someone's struggling to go to school, we'll talk about doing a transition back to school. And there's a lot of the times that the kids want us to answer 15 possible what ifs that can happen, because their mind is like, I can't go back into that school building if I'm not 100% sure of what's going to happen, because again, that anxiety is about the unknown. So then it wants to answer all the questions it possibly can. Fidgeting or hard time sitting still, possibly even acting out or irritability. That could be part of the fight part of that flight or fight. Sometimes as we're starting to climb, sometimes even if we're not physically fighting, that urge is still getting there, which might be a little acting out or irritability. Or perhaps the other end of the spectrum, being quiet or selectively mute, possibly even engaging in unhealthy coping strategies such as like substance use or self-harm. And then avoiding any kind of situation where anxiety has shown up, or possibly even generalize out to areas that they think would be the same. Anxiety is really looking for us to be safe and be comfortable, and sometimes it can go into overprotective mode for sure. So some sources of anxiety, we talked a little bit about some of these, but like new transitions, because again, it's that unknown. So if we're going to a new school, if we have a new teacher, we're going to even a different part of the building, our social worker switches, anything like that, we don't know how that's going to work and how that's going to end up. And so it can be really anxiety provoking. Any kind of social situations or academic, I don't know what grade I'm going to get. And so that can be really scary. I don't know. And again, especially if they're teenagers and it feels that perhaps their like college admissions might get threatened by a certain grade, that's something that then it feels as if something could come to them that's harmful. I think sometimes we, look at harm as something that's like physically harming, that might threaten our lives. But it's also a little bit more about like livelihood too. And again, that social belongingness. So concerns about the future or about loved ones and any kind of trauma that has occurred, then anxiety can show up. of fear of panic attacks or even having anxiety can be a source of it too. Any kind of performance, so speeches, group work, raising their hand in the middle of class to answer a question, or being called on by a teacher. Specific fears such as vomiting or world events, like a school shooting, bullying, and then also like health worries. We see that sometimes as well. These might be all like the sources of anxiety. So that's a little bit of background about anxiety specifically related to school. So talking about some practical strategies to help your anxiety manage, help your child to manage anxiety in a healthy way. So a lot of the times I get asked about specific, you can go ahead to the next slide. A lot of times I've been asked about like specific skills. So that's what I'm going to try to share with you today. Skills action plan, this is something we talk about in the adolescent anxiety and OCD program at Endeavor Health Linden Oaks. We have all of these action plans that we do, but I would need about 4 hours to teach all of them. And so I'm just going to talk about a little bit about one of them that I think is very helpful for parents to use. I use this action plan with my own son. I even use it for my own anxiety, as well as when I'm interacting with my patients, including adults too. I don't even think this is necessarily just for kids. I think this is just a great action plan that can just really help give us a frame for what to do in situations where we're also anxious ourselves as parents. So this is just based off of 2 types of therapy: dialectical behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy. So everything we're going to talk about comes from those 2 therapies. And we're going to talk about regulating just emotions on a daily basis to hopefully help keep our anxiety low. And then we're also going to talk about this stop frame, which is more of what to help if we think intense anxiety is going to show up. So we're going to dive into this a little bit deeper. So you can go ahead to the next one. So setting up your day for success. I know like some of this is probably, none of this is going to be a surprise to you guys. It's just so important to talk about because these are the things that's really going to help keep our anxiety lower on a scale. So oftentimes, if we're not doing these things, if we're not taking care of our body, so if we're not eating well, sleeping well, if we're not getting, the proper number of sleep, if they're spending time on their phone in their beds and they're not getting that proper amount of sleep, if they're not getting active, if they're not taking their medication properly, doing things like that, we could, as we're just even walking out the door, we haven't even gone to school yet, our anxiety could be at a 5 and we haven't even done anything yet. And then we really need to know what's important. Why are we going to school? Reminding ourselves of our values, of like, why are we going there? Why are we going to be willing to be uncomfortable? And so that's what the know what's important. I think sometimes we can get a little lost on why we're doing this, why going to school, why doing these hard things like speeches and taking tests, doing group work, getting participation. Why are we doing these things? And it's all for our future. It's to build our tolerance level up so that our children can be and do whatever they want, and that we don't have to get all these roadblocks in our way. Making sure to accumulate positive experiences. So doing things on a daily basis, kind of accumulating positive experience and engage in meaningful activities are very connected. The accumulate positive experience are kind of the little things that we do on a daily basis just to improve things. So this might be as we're doing homework, we're playing fun music. This might be making sure that we're getting up and getting dressed, not wearing pajamas to school. Having like a fun dessert at lunch, or things like that. These things can add up. It's like marbles in a jar. These kind of things can really add up. Engaging in meaningful activities. These are doing more of the hobbies and interests that's going to build a sense of accomplishment and competency. There's a lot of research that shows if we stop doing things that we're building mastery, that is really what can lower self-esteem, self-confidence. So then if we're not doing the things at school to challenge ourselves, the speeches, the tests, all of those type of things, then we're not building that competency. And then at the same time, the self-esteem can go down. And then it's really important to recover throughout the day. We can have days that are stressful, even for us, and we need to make sure sure that we're doing things throughout the day so that we're not just going up and up and up and up and up a scale of like on a scale of 1 to 10. We're not just going up and up and up throughout the day, that maybe we're going to go up a little bit, then we're going to do something to help us recovery. So this is like taking breaks, taking gratitude moments, things like that, making sure that we're not talking about the anxiety all day long. That can happen sometimes. Again, that what if questioning comes up. And so these are the type of things that just on a daily basis are really important to help keep us lower on our anxiety scales. So then that stop skill. So now this is when we think some big anxiety starting to come. And so this is to help us manage really just all of emotions. And so there's 4 main steps to it. Slow your breathing, take note, open up, and pursue values. But the very first thing we want to do when a situation occurs is stop. A lot of the times, because that fight or flight system is getting activated, the anxiety says, do something, do something, and then we'll do something impulsive that we'll regret later often. And so the very first thing is to stop. And even as parents, we want to do that too, because we don't want to immediately react, especially for the younger kids. They often look to us to see how they should react. So if we're panicking, they're going to panic. So we're going to talk about these. Go ahead to the next one. So slow your breathing. So there's a reason that we start with this one, because slowing your breath, there is so much research that it really helps ground us in the present moment and help calm the body. And so the fight or flight system is the sympathetic nervous system in our body that's getting activated. And breathing exercises have really been shown to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that system that helps calm the body, reduce the emotional arousal. And so when we're faced with an anxiety provoking situation where we're not really sure, it can be hard to think of skills in the moment. So getting present, our breathing is something that's happening here and now. So even if we're having future worries about what if this or what if that's going to happen, our breathing is happening right now, and the present moments where we want to be. Sometimes the present moment can be a struggle, can be anxiety provoking. So we don't want to add things from the past and the future. We don't want to add things on top of that, because the present moment can be a struggle. So then we want to try to decrease our suffering. So we want to get present. We want to try to do our best to keep our body calm, because if we start to breathe heavier, our heart is going to increase, and then that's what's going to get our body revved up. So an example is 4 square breathing. I didn't just randomly pick this. This is one of our kids' absolute favorite at the program. I think it's really simple and easy to remember to do. And so there's a little picture there too. And so we breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, and hold it for 4 seconds. Those holds are very intentional, because we're trying to gain control of our breathing. We don't want to breathe like 1, 2, 3, 4. We want to breathe nice and slow, so that way we're regulating our body again. And then we want to do that multiple times. Sometimes we'll even say 4 times to help remember. So it's 4 square breathing, and we want to do that 4 times. As parents, we can do this with them. Say, let's do this. Oftentimes, don't ask. If we ask, a lot of times the anxiety is going to be like, no, it doesn't work. We don't even want to bring that up. We just want to be like, let's practice a breathing exercise together. Do it with me. Breathe in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. And as parents, it helps us just as much, because again, we want to, 1, be a good role model, but 2, we need to keep ourselves calm, because it's going to help keep them calm. So slow the breathing is kind of step 1. Then we want to take note. Sorry. Yep. Go ahead to the next slide. So then we want to take note. That's what the T stands for, because we want to figure out what's going on. It's really hard for us to make effective choices if we don't even know what's going on. And then what'll happen is, again, the anxiety will be like, I'll take over. I really picture sort of the mind like Inside Out. And I know it's kind of silly, but I think it works that way, that it's like anxiety goes up to that dashboard and just starts taking over and making like impulsive decisions. So we need to know what's going on. So we want to take note what's happening. We want our kids to be able to start to recognize what's happening in their body. So we want to help them do this if we can. So, what kind of thoughts are you having right now? Talk to me about that. What kind of feelings, what kind of urges, maybe some physical sensations. Sometimes some things you can help to guide them. You don't want to give them the answer, because again, we want them to do this so then they can become more independent, more secure, more confident in their own abilities to understand their body and what's going on. They can appreciate the anxiety for what it's meant to do, which is to help motivate us. So when it comes to that test, it helps us study. When it comes to that speech, it helps us practice, versus it's just too much and then I'm backing off and I'm not going to do it at all. We want the anxiety to help us in a way that's going to be effective for us for our future. So we want to see what's going on. We can say, like, is there anything going on in your head? Like, is there anything going on with your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your throat, your chest, your arms? We can, help them by guiding them through it. Can you put a word to what you're feeling? I have a little picture here that can give several examples. You can use like numbers too, on a scale of like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. How high, how intensive this emotion. You can use colors, green, yellow, red. You can use the smiley faces. And if they struggle to even talk, they can point if you can print this off. And so it's who's involved. And we really want to be this, we want to gather information like a curious scientist. So again, I think one of the things that's very scary about anxiety is that a lot of the times kids, as well as even adults, like don't even know what's going on. So the more that we can know what's going on, then we can respond with like, okay, I know this. I know that when I do things in front of other people, like a speech or answering a question, then this is what shows up for me when this happens. And I'm familiar with it and I know it. And I have evidence that I can get through it. If we avoid it, we don't have the evidence to know that we can get through it. And really, like, slow your breathing. You can take note while you're slowing your breathing. Go ahead to the next one, which is just open up. We can't build our tolerance to anxiety. We can't, we can't be aware of it and be that curious scientist if we're not willing to open up to it. So the O stands for open up, which is really just acknowledging, here it is, here's the anxiety. I know it can feel uncomfortable, but if we can get used to it, we can actually use it to our advantage to make us more productive. It communicates with us. Maybe we're in a dangerous spot, but we can identify that if there's a danger there, we can identify that. Or is this more of, oh, I'm worried about being embarrassed, or I'm worried about my grades because I want to get into college, and being able to put words to what is my anxiety trying to communicate with us. And the goal is to survive emotional experiences by riding the wave. And we can't ride that emotional wave if we're not open up to it and we don't even know what's going on. But all of these can happen very quickly. I know when I'm trying to explain it can feel like, how am I supposed to do this? I don't have time to do this. But all of the slow your breathing, take note, and open up, we can do that all kind of simultaneously and have it be like a 3-minute. And the more you practice it, the quicker it will come. And then the last piece is the pursue value. So this is really important. I have my son's 9, and I use this term with him. His school, I live out in Schaumburg, so it's a little farther away, but his school uses value words like responsibility and be safe and be kind. Those are value words. So even young kids know what these, maybe we don't use the word value, but these are kind of the qualities, the attitudes, the characteristics we're looking for. And we don't want the anxiety to make decisions for us. We want our values. How do we want to show up? How do I want to show up as a friend? How do I want to show up as a student? That's what makes our decision on how we behave. Is this, is going home for the day from school or going back to class? Like, is that going to move me in line with my values? Is this choice going to make it better or worse? And you can talk about what about right now versus later. And then having a kit handy. We make kits all the time, or we ask the kids to make kits, and it's just taking like a pencil bag, a makeup bag, and putting things in there that could help them in the moment of distress. A lot of times we have different ones at home than we'd have for school. And then we have some life skills that we can do for low to moderate emotions, or crisis skills if we're talking about big and intense emotions. So we're going to talk about those. These are our favorites. And so some tools that we can use, you can go ahead to the next one. Again, I didn't just randomly pick these. These are ones that the kids at our program love. And so we're going to talk about 5 life skills. You can go ahead to the next one. So bubble wand is a favorite. So bubble wand is really helpful to help us when we're having unwanted thoughts, scary thoughts, unhelpful thoughts, thoughts that are not going to move us in our values. And we can sort of imagine, if you imagine like the bubbles that kids play with, if you imagine that you're just, lots of bubbles floating up into the sky, and that you can like magically place your thoughts in there, the scary ones, the unwanted ones, and let those bubbles take them. And really, you can use any vehicle you want. You can do leaves on a stream, clouds in the sky, rocket ships going to the moon, train cars. It doesn't matter. Just something to help a little bit with those thoughts that just seem a little too big. And the great thing is we can practice these all the time. We don't even need something for this. They can practice it in class. No one's even going to know. So if they start to worry about the test that they have in a couple periods from now, they can take those thoughts, put it in a bubble. And if you have younger kids, even the older kids don't mind this so much. If you have real bubbles, go ahead and do it. It'll even make it a little bit more concrete for them. And I know it can sound a little silly, but it's very helpful. And there's a lot of research that shows any kind of vehicle like this, again, the leaves, the clouds, anything that can just help us with it. Conveyor belt is another one too. So that's one. And then the starfish stretch. Oh, this one's a favorite. This one's a little harder to do in class, but we can modify it. And so a starfish stretch is what it sounds like. It's stretching out as much as you can. So back to that fight or flight zone, is that if that fight or flight is going up and that body, naturally our body goes in. If we're going to start to run away, our shoulders come in, we crouch down, we're going to run away. Or if we're going to fight, same thing, we're getting ready to go. So a starfish stretch is the exact opposite of that. And our mind and our body's connected, and they want to stay connected. So if our body's opening up and not acting like we're in some sort of danger, then our mind will catch on board and we'll be able to do it. So a way to do it in class is just not quite as big of a stretch, perhaps just like stretching down, something like that. But if the anxiety is kind of big, we can just, if we go to the bathroom or you can kind of stretch in class. I don't think anyone would even know you're doing anything. But there's just so much research that this is helpful, that it just immediately sends signals to the brain that I'm not actually in physical danger. Go ahead to the next one. Rainbow grounding. This one's a favorite. This is just looking around the room. Again, we can do it in class because the whole goal is always to keep the kids in class. And so we want skills that we can do in class so they can stay in there. So rainbow grounding, we call it, which is just looking around the room to find objects of the color of the rainbow, and to be honest, beyond just every color they can think of. And so they can look around the room and be like, this is blue, this is green, this is red, and they can keep going. 5 things that are red, 4 things that are blue, however it works. But the idea of it is if there's a lot going on in our mind, we want to get out again into the present moment. Because if we're thinking 3 periods ahead, that's the future. We want to be present. We want to be engaged. And so the first step sometimes to help us do that is to like just get into the room. And so they can still sort of listen to their teacher as they're looking around. So if they notice their mind drifting to the future or drifting to the past, then they can focus on something else that's in the room so they don't have to leave class. But to the next one, this one's a little similar, but it's using our 5 senses instead of like well, I guess looking around is still a sense, but it's using all 5 at the same time. So it's looking around the room, again, staying in class, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you taste. And you can do all these things in the car, if you're driving your kid to school, if you're walking your kid to school, if you're at home doing homework. And you can do this in any order that you want, but your 5 senses, again, always present. And we want to do our best to stay present. I have used things like this with my own son when, we're even, because these are life skills. So if he's like, we're waiting at the doctor's office and it's taken a super long time, like these are the things that I can use to help him get present versus what's going on? Why is it happening? That kind of stuff that shows up when we get bored sometimes. Go ahead to the next one. Dropping anchor. This one's my absolute favorite. That's why this one's in here, but the kids like it too. And so this is pulling in a little bit of stop as well, but it's acknowledging those thoughts and feelings, connecting to your body. So like pushing your feet on the floor, sitting up, pushing your shoulders back. I think this is a little connected to the starfish. It's really dropping anchor and having your body steady and to it. So stretching your shoulders back, possibly even pushing your fingertips together, noticing where your body's making contact with the chair and the floor, and then engaging in what you're doing to keep your values in mind. I use this all the time. I think this is a good way to transition from different classes. So if the kids are coming in from like recess and now it's hard, to maybe sit down and do math, I think dropping anchor, okay, everyone drop anchor, just kind of like a boat to help steady the body. A dropping anchor helps steady the boat, and this can help steady our body too. But again, I love this one as an adult for myself, as well as when I'm working with anyone who's anxious. All right, so those were the 5 life skills to help that. So if someone's at like a 9 or a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, those skills aren't as distracting. Not that you can't still use them, but these are going to be even more distracting. So go ahead to the next one. Is there a next one? Yes. So tip the temperature. This one's hard to do in class, but it's such a favorite. I can't not share it. So this is something that can be helpful if they're at home doing schoolwork, or even if you're walking out the door and they're saying I'm at a 7, I'm at an 8 out of 10. Tip at the temperature is about splashing like cold water in your face, grabbing an ice pack and lying it over their eyes, and they have to hold their breath while they're doing it to get the full research effect. And so what's happening is this dive reflex that occurs, that when our face meets really cold water, it automatically triggers a shift in your body chemistry quickly to induce that relaxation response. So there's this connection with super cold water hitting your face. So if they're at home, they could take a cold shower, just splashing some cold water on their face. Again, the ice packs, that's what we use in the program. And sometimes you can like put it back here on your neck, but it changes the body chemistry very quickly. So if the body gets ramped up really quickly, if we do this, it activates that parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we're looking for. Go ahead to the next one. Intense exercise. Again, this is when we're getting to anxiety of like 9 or 10. So if they are at school, hopefully they're practicing those other skills that we just talked about, and that's going to lower their anxiety. But if it's still high, then we can do things like this. Maybe they can take a 5-minute break to the bathroom, and I don't know if they would think it's too silly, but doing like jumping jacks or something like that. So just intense exercise can change the body chemistry very quickly. Again, if we're ready for that fight or flight, but there's nowhere for that energy to go, doing like 15 jumping jacks or high knees, jumping rope, burpees, something like that can be really helpful. Endorphins are released, which there's a lot of research out there that if endorphins are released with intense exercise, it helps reduce pain, improve mood, increase well-being. But that intense exercise, because we're trying to get rid of some of that energy and we're wrapping the body up almost on purpose, then the flip side happens and that parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, which then calms the body. Progressive muscle relaxation. This is one they can do in class, which is great. So the whole goal of this is to release the tension in the body when it's feeling extremely tense. And so, and little kids can do this too. And so the idea of it is that you're moving through your muscles. You're starting at your toes, working your way to your head. And on the in breath, you're tensing the muscle. And on the out breath, you're letting it go and you hold it for 5 seconds. So if you start at your feet and crinkle your toes as you breathe in, and then as you release, undo it. So I know you can't see me doing my toes, but if I was moving my way up, my shoulders, as I breathe in, and then breathe out. And then, you can just keep moving up and you flex your feet, you flex your knees, and you just keep moving up your body and your hands, and then let go, and things like that. And it's all sorts of different things that they can do in class that can be really helpful. And then that can really release the tension. And then brain puzzles. And so this one's a favorite too, because of all of that our mind can start to race when we get anxious. So activities that distract the mind from big emotions or unwanted thoughts. There's so many we can do: word searches, extreme dot to dots, Sudoku, mazes, crosswords, all sorts of those kind of things. And you can print these off the internet on a single sheet of paper. Sometimes I think some of these puzzle books are so big, and, like a kid to be able to plop that on their desk. But, this is just something that takes a lot of mental effort, so that if you think, to simplify it, if you think our mind has like 10 resources, and then we're starting to get anxious about a test or something. So like, let's say 9 of the resources is going to that anxiety. If we start doing a word search and we start searching through the letters to find the word, let's say house, and then, we find it, little by little, those resources that were all put towards the anxiety is now going over to this rational mindset, which is what we want, right? The emotions are over controlled, so we want to increase our rational mind. And so then doing these little by little, but what can happen sometimes is that we're doing this and then this happens and we get down, and then they're like, oh, it's not working. And it's like, because it's hard sometimes when you're in that intense anxiety to notice the little progress at first. But if we keep it up and keep looking for those words, then maybe only like 2 of the resources are going to the anxiety. But it's a way to really maintain that focus on something by doing like a word search or an extreme dot to dot. And then it can help us, because we can even use our fingers if we need to help us keep control. So like in our group rooms for our program, we just have like file folders of all of these type of things that they can use right there in the moment. And, you would want to talk to the teacher about it, or talk to the social worker at the school about, making sure that there's if it's okay to have like a sheet of paper like this that could have one of these puzzles. But even at home, these are things that are really helpful as they're in the car, driving to school, if they're really anxious about it. Something like that can just take up a lot of mental effort, which is what we're looking for sometimes. Page. And then the ABC game. This is where we pick a theme and choose a word that begins with each letter of the alphabet. So as you can see here as an example, is like, if it's animals, it's like you go alligator, bear, cat, dog. And as a parent, we can do this with them. I do A, my son does B. I do C, my son does D. And we go back and forth. We can do it together, or they can do it by themselves. All of these things, the progressive muscle relaxation, again, we can do it with them. Do it with me. Even the ice pack and things like that, every single one of these things we can do with them. So then that way we're being a good role model, as well as helping our own anxiety with dealing with maybe our child that's anxious too. But the cool part about this one is that there's so many options. They can do it by themselves. We can do it. They can take a piece of paper, A to Z, and just start filling in these categories. It can be names, it could be stores, it could be cities, it could be colors. There's so many themes out there that it's kind of endless that we can do, and we can play this game, and we don't need a single object even to have it. And then here's some book recommendations. So these are more books that are geared towards the parent. And so if you like some of the things you heard today, these are a few of the books that can help for that. And then the next slide is specific for like workbooks more. So one of the cool things about the happiness trap is that there's one more geared towards like adults or like parents. And then this illustrated happiness trap is like a comic book. So it's a little bit more geared towards the kids. And then the other 2 are workbooks, so that you can actually practice some of these things that I've talked about today, and then have like a worksheet with it rather than just like reading. You could do like one activity a night, something like that. And so that's my presentation. Sorry, I went a couple minutes over.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Kohler. At this time, we are going to move to our panel. With us tonight, in addition to Dr. Kohler, are 3 of our Indian Prairie School District 204 mental health staff members. First, we have Bernice Ward. She is a social worker at Gombert Elementary. Secondly, we have Anna Themenson. She is a school counselor at Granger Middle School. And lastly, we have Ryan Russell. He is the mental health coordinator at Neuqua Valley High School. When registering, there was an opportunity to submit questions or things that you would like for the panel to discuss. And I went through and I looked for some common trends, and I put them into questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share some of these questions, and the panel, including Dr. Kohler, can jump in and answer. And if you have any questions that you're thinking about, you can also pop those into the chat. So the first question someone asked was, I have noticed my child grinding her teeth when she becomes anxious. How can I help my child when I see physical symptoms of anxiety, like teeth grinding?
You guys want me to take that?
Sure.
Um, I can explain an option too of why perhaps she might be grinding back with that fight or flight that's kicking in. One of the things, if we really did feel like we were in danger, would be that we would bite. That's like an evolutionary way to help protect ourselves. So when that happens, sometimes our jaw gets tense, which then can help us, because it's just getting ready. We're getting ready to run around, or to run away, and to clench and things like that. Um, and so sometimes something that can help with that is like if you were there, let's say they were doing homework or on their way to school, getting like a starburst, but not chewing it. Like just keep the starburst mindfully, kind of notice the starburst in your mouth, let it melt away. So then it's kind of giving something that's not like clenching down. Or I know it kind of seems silly, but like a full kind of yawn stretch can be really helpful for that as well, because it's just kind of dialectically doing the opposite of what we want to do. Those are just a couple ideas that I have.
Great. All right, thank you, Dr. Kohler. Another question someone said is, my child becomes very anxious about completing homework and getting the answers correct. How can I help with this?
I'm happy to add to that answer. So I actually went to the Illinois School Counselor Association conference earlier today and heard something that I wanted to share, in that the kids are learning how to do well. 204 is really preparing them well in that regards. And what we need to do as a community, as a parent community, as teachers and counselors, we need to teach them how to fail, right? So we need to teach them how to respond when they inevitably encounter life's, mistakes, life's errors, when they fail on whatever spectrum that is, right? It could be that they, missed a pass in volleyball. In gym, it could be that they played the wrong note, or, they said the wrong thing to a friend. Like all of those things, in addition to, not scoring as well as they had hoped on an assignment or a test. We really need to normalize that failure. And so in those regards, we really need to like praise the effort and not the outcome. So, wow, you have been working so hard on this. I really see how much time you've put into it. Why don't you take a break right now? Right. So encouraging those breaks too. I always tell my kids that, when I'm talking to them about time management, organization, I want them to schedule in time to rest, relax, play, sometimes cry if they're really upset. I'm like, okay, 7:30 tonight, cry time, right? Just to help them understand that it's okay to take a break. A lot of this pressure, it's coming from the students with each other. Sometimes it's coming from parents, sometimes it's coming from just community. We always want to have our students strive for more. And sometimes that can, you know, have the opposite effect too, where it stresses them out. So just really praising the effort, making sure that you are, talking to them first as your child and then second as a student.
Yeah, I love that you kind of hit on that here, because especially at the high school level, I mean, we have a community here where kids are kind of go go go. I gotta say yes to everything. I have to be, in this honors class, this AP level class. I got to do all these different activities, and then where are we finding that time to kind of pause, take a break, do something almost fun for yourself? That's something I kind of work with all my kids as well here. Like, hey, how are we scheduling time away from any schoolwork, to do something fun, to read a book, away from your phone too? Just kind of finding that time to pause. So I love that.
Yeah, I would say that modeling is important too. We all make mistakes. We all have failures. So as adults, it's good for us to kind of model what that language looks like, even when we ourselves make a mistake. Our children hearing us model that language. Oh my goodness, this isn't the end of the world. I made a mistake, but it's okay. That teaches them too, that when they make mistakes of their own, or when that pressure happens, that they too will survive it. So it's good to model.
Yes, thank you. Another question that was asked was, and this is maybe more of a parent-centered question, when my child becomes anxious, I find myself getting frustrated because they won't accept my help or suggestions. How can I stop myself from getting frustrated and ultimately becoming annoyed or angry with my child?
It makes me think of this one phrase, and I forget the author's name, so I apologize. But it's kids do well if they can, right? And so I want us to always remember that typically these kids aren't just putting on a show because it's like fun and they're getting a thrill out of it. Sometimes, we see our kids engaging in connection seeking behaviors. I like to say connection seeking versus attention seeking, because ultimately that's what they're going for. And so it's good to remind yourself that this isn't fun for the kid to be going through either. It's, equally as stressful as frustrating, because they also probably don't want to be feeling those feelings or frustrations themselves. And so I think it's important to just remind yourself of that. And then when it's appropriate, when they're kind of more, at the homeostasis after they've found those skills that work for them, that help them kind of, calm down a bit, having that conversation of, hey, this is what I've noticed when you are, heightened emotionally. I try to make suggestions and it's not received. What's going on for you? It could be that because they're in that fight or flight, they literally cannot think. Their prefrontal cortex is disconnected, so their survival instincts are at play, and there's just not a lot of communicating and decision making going on because we can't, like, we literally can't. We're in survival mode. And so maybe that's not the time to make suggestions. Maybe it's when they're more, calm, cool, collected, that you talk through what would be helpful. Okay, all right, next time I know that you will do XYZ and I'll leave you be and I'll follow up afterwards.
I think going back to something that Dr. Kohler shared too about modeling some of the coping tools that we are practicing with them in that moment, recognizing our own frustration and maybe even narrating through some of that a little bit. So we're normalizing that as well, that expression of it, and then also kind of engaging in one of those coping strategies just so that they can see it, that we too as adults get frustrated and it's okay, that we can survive that too. That could be important as well.
Another question we have, and it is situationally specific, but it relates to social anxiety, so I think we could generalize it a little bit. But somebody said, our second grade son started school 6 weeks ago and is experiencing some social anxiety because English is his second language. His language barrier, accompanied by a new school environment, prevents him from playing with other kids at recess. He comes home tense and anxious sometimes and mentions that it's making him feel lonely. What can we do to help? So both situationally specific, but also may talk about social anxiety with our kids on the playground who maybe aren't feeling like they're fitting in, or they feel like there's barriers stopping them from making friends. What can we do?
My mind goes, I think there's some like short-term things, but then longer term things. So, perhaps if he's able to say if there's a kid in his class that has been nice, they've talked to, maybe we could look to do a play date to help foster that relationship. I know that's not something that can be done in the moment, but like a little bit long term to try to help do that. And possibly to kind of role play a way to like enter, a situation with us of like, because I don't know that much about obviously the situation, but I think a lot of times like if they're in kindergarten and then if he was in kindergarten and in first grade, you're kind of taught in kindergarten, the teacher rallies and gets all the kids ready to go. But now he's entering second grade where people have already become connected, perhaps. And so that he or she might not know how to say, hey, can I play with you guys? It seems sometimes like as in our adult brains that it's something that's simple, but being able to practice that at home with him, like, hey, let's practice this, of how we can ask to join something, or even ahead of time say, hey, can I play with you at recess? Something like that. My mind, those are just a couple ideas of trying to work on short term and then a long term thing.
Ryan, thinking about high school, how would you address this at an older level when students feel like they're not fitting in socially and it's causing anxiety?
That's something where, too, I would definitely say we do things here where we might pair a student with like another student mentor. So we have at the high school level, especially for some of our new students, we have a group of students who, hey, if you are new to Neuqua Valley, we will pair you with another student, and that student will have lunch with you, walk with you, kind of to your classes, tour you through the building, just to kind of help acclimate you to kind of the climate and the culture of the school. We also have a thing here for new students of don't mean to go down the new student route, but it's a new student group too. So we have that time where these students could kind of build and socialize together. But that's just something too in general that I would encourage any parents just to kind of talk with the school staff, because that support isn't limited to, hey, you have to be a new student to get that. We've had some times in some instances where we've kind of paired a kid with that mentor to build some of those social skills. So I would definitely kind of encourage parents reach out to that school staff.
Yeah, we also have a new student group that runs periodically as we get transfer students. And at Granger, we have a huge variety of languages represented. So more often than not, I'm pulling other students to be a part of the new student group, just to be buddies with the folks that, English is a learning language for them, and can help translate and also make them feel welcome and at home. And it helps because if there's multiple, students who maybe started at the start of the school year, or they've always been in our district, they know each other and they can help make connections with their friends in the group too now.
I think we have time for one last question. Somebody was asking, what accommodations can be available at school to support your child with anxiety if he or she does not have an IEP or 504 plan? Who would you contact? How would you go about approaching them? And do you need to get tested to have supports in place for a child with anxiety? So there's a lot rolled into one, but what would be the steps in terms of school, and what supports could be in place if your child does not have a specific IEP or 504 plan?
I'd say in general, just kind of start at the high school here. Like I said in the previous question, kind of reach out to your school support staff. So at the high school level, your school counselor, your social worker. There could be a variety of different things we could put in place. Some of them would be kind of different breaks as needed. Come on up to the class house, meet with the support staff. We could do little things such as we've done like extended time on a test if needed to kind of give a test or kind of test run of that. We've done kind of different check-ins on different, hey, are you understanding this homework assignment? Are you understanding this project? A bunch of little things that we could informally put in place that also, if needed, we could kind of work with testing and turn that into a more formal plan as well.
Anna, could you speak to the middle school?
Yeah, absolutely. So very similar to what Ryan said, I would start with the school counselor. I know it's different to elementary, so I'll let Bernice take that. But the school counselor is a great place to start. They are kind of the people who oversee the general population. And so we can do everything from, weekly check-ins. You could be a part of a group. We could connect you with other resources. I know a lot of the schools in the district are very, we're very lucky to have the resources we do, and that we have, private practices or other, community agencies coming to schools to provide therapy free of charge to students. So that could be another option. and also like what Ryan said, if you are curious about a 504 or IEP, you can always call the school student services coordinator to talk through what that could look like, and see if what you're seeing at home is matching what we're seeing at school. And so we can help bridge that gap and talk through if a more formalized plan is needed, but then also what can we do here at school to make sure that the student is feeling, comfortable in their academic setting and feel like they have equal access to an education.
Thank you, Anna. And Renee, can you speak to elementary?
Sure. At the elementary level, it's similar. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your child's teacher first to see what types of supports they have in the classroom setting. A lot of times, classrooms may have calming corners or calming bins that students can utilize. They can always take breaks when they need to. Teachers typically have some sort of back table that if kids do need to separate to take a test, they can do that. You can also reach out to the social worker at your school. The social workers are available to everyone at the school, so you don't just have to have an IEP or 504 to seek out those services. We can also provide supports and ideas for strategies and different things that the child could use at school. Again, similar to what Anna and Ryan said, if there is we're thinking that there might be more of a need for a more formalized plan. Our student services coordinators are the ones who set that up and talk about the testing and assessing and all of that. But definitely the classroom teachers and the social workers at the elementary level are good resources to reach out to.
Thank you. All right. Well, hopefully this evening you've taken away some practical strategies that you can use with your own child at home when they do become anxious. Thank you, Dr. Kohler, for your presentation, and Anna and Ryan and Renese for sharing your expertise. If you have any further questions, please reach out to your school's buildings. As all three of them have mentioned, there are so many supports, teachers, social workers, counselors, student service coordinators who are happy to help. Have a great evening.